G'day ZKD here, and prepare yourselves for the Hellfire Blender, the Infernal Hockey Puck, the Righteous Roomba, the one, the only, Righteous Fire Marauder! In this video I'm going to be giving you guys the final build guide to my Righteous Fire Marauder. Now this build was a part of a 7-day project where basically my idea was to, on day 0, create a build, and then from day 1 through till day 7, take that build from the very beginning, work it up to end game, gear it out for its final end game spec, take it into high level maps, and eventually take on Atsuri. And that's exactly what we did, and overall I'd call the project a real success. The idea was basically, in doing this, to be able to document every single facet of the build, and I kept together a massive spreadsheet full of info on the different gems I used, the passive skill tree, even details on each of the different maps I played and how I approached the different bosses and different difficulties and strengths that the build had. The idea is essentially to detail and break down a build on a level of depth that I'd never done before. So when coming up with this idea for a 7-day project, I kind of wanted to do a build that I knew would be strong, but that I knew would be relatively budget or easy to gear out as a first character in a new league, but also to have really good endgame scaling potential. And I looked at a few different builds, and Righteous Fire has been something I wanted to play for a very long time. And I always thought that Righteous Fire was a build that's very expensive, very difficult to get into, very difficult to gear. And although it is a complex build, once broken down, it's actually very easy to get up and running, and also very cheap to actually get up and started. There's only one mandatory item to be able to make a Righteous Fire build like this. And for the amount that you have to invest in this character, which is completely earnable with the character itself while leveling, you get a ridiculous amount of survivability and DPS, more so than I've ever had in any other build before. It frankly blew me away at how powerful this character was at level 65 when it switched over to Righteous Fire. So if you guys would like more info on the entire leveling process and all of this information I've gathered up, there will be plenty of links down in the description below to take you guys through everything you need to know about the build and progressing the build, leveling up the build, and switching over to Righteous Fire, snapshotting, all of the extra info you could want, even about getting into maps as I mentioned. But in this video I'm going to be covering how the final build works, what its potential is, and how it all comes together in terms of skill gems, passive trees, and skill usage and things like that. So let's jump straight into it. The primary skill and focus of this build is, of course, Righteous Fire. In this build we use Righteous Fire to passively deal damage to enemies in a small AoE around us, rather than as the spell damage boost that it also doubles as. The damage to enemies is based off of 50% of our total life pool, so the first way we ensure high DPS is simply by stacking a lot of life in both the passive tree and on gear. We then scale that damage through the concentrated effect and increased burning damage support gems, and by taking advantage of the gear snapshotting technique. At my current state with 6,000 life, Righteous Fire puts out close to 30,000 DPS. Considering this DPS only cost around 3 exalts, it's actually incredibly good value. However, using Righteous Fire is no easy task, as it deals 90% of our HP per second in fire damage to ourselves. So, how can we stay alive with 90% of our life dealt per second? Well, we're able to counteract this by stacking a very large amount of life regeneration, and by boosting our maximum fire resistance to over 90% with Purity of Fire, the resistance nodes on the passive tree, and through the use of the unique shield Rise of the Pheonix. Now we get all of this fire resist and regen and all that jazz so that we can actually just simply use Righteous Fire to deal damage without actually just killing ourselves. But another side effect is that in the process we become incredibly tanky. After subtracting the damage of Righteous Fire, I still have well over 200 life regen per second at my current state, and using a Ruby Flask to temporarily max out our fire resist, so boosting it from 90 to 100% fire resist, boosts that to over 750 life regen per second, way more than the best life flasks in the game. To further increase our survivability, we use Cyclone supported by life gain on hit to path through enemies and to heal us for another 40 life per hit. Since Cyclone hits very fast, especially with a high attack speed weapon like RotP, we actually end up healing quite a lot by doing this. Cyclone also causes our Elemental Equilibrium Keystone passive to take effect to reduce enemy fire resistance. It can do this by simply having a small amount of cold or lightning damage on our jewelry. For example, I have something like 4 to 6 cold damage on my amulet. Elemental Equilibrium reduces enemy fire resistance when you hit them with either cold or lightning, effectively doubling the damage dealt by Righteous Fire as it reduces their resistance by 50%. Next up, after we power it up, we can also unleash a Vile Cyclone to draw enemies to us and into the Righteous Fire AoE, whilst also healing us with life gain on hit and proccing Elemental Equilibrium at the same time. Using Vile Cyclone to clear massive rooms of mobs and even kill bosses in a few seconds is extremely satisfying. For mobility, we use Leap Slam linked to faster attacks. Since we are wielding the unique weapon Brightbeak with its huge attack speed boost, Leap Slam is much faster than actually running around, and it also lets us get up ledges and over obstacles really quickly. As an added bonus, it will also proc Elemental Equilibrium on hit as well, since it is an attack. For auras, we run Purity of Fire and Vitality to help support Righteous Fire. We also run the Grace aura, which grants a large amount of bonus armor thanks to the Iron Reflex's keystone, which converts evasion into armor. For the rare situations where we need even more damage, we can curse enemies with Elemental Weakness to reduce their fire resistance by close to 50% again. Keep in mind that this can take enemies down into negative resistances. The Cast When Damage Taken Trigger Gem also makes an appearance in our build, linked to Ice Nova to help activate Elemental Equilibrium, and to Enduring Cry to help provide more physical mitigation. Other skills include Searing Bond to deal with totems, since Righteous Fire doesn't actually affect totems, and Immortal Call to provide us with several seconds of physical immunity so we can get up close to more dangerous enemies like Coal and things like that to burn them down. So now let's move on to a detailed look at the passive skill tree. Okay, so let's take a look at my build at its current level of 85, and I'll also give some suggestions about where you can go from here. So basically we start off Marauder. You can start as a Scion. It's a little bit less optimal because she has 10 max life compared to 16 max life for the same passive point expenditure. And you can start as Templar, but there's one wasted mana regeneration node there, but pretty much. So I reckon Marauder is definitely the most min-maxed choice if you want to go that route. So we come down through, we grab all the life and armor and all the life regeneration. Life regeneration is super crucial to running Righteous Fire. We come up and through and grab all these sweet life nodes, and then into Diamond Skin and the fire resistance node here. These two together give 2+ max to maximum fire resistance, and this is essential for running Righteous Fire. And I've also grabbed the lightning resist node there because that's very handy in high level maps to have increased maximum lightning resistance, and for one passive point it's not too bad. So from there we can head up into Sentinel. Coming all the way through here, we can pick up some nice extra 8% life nodes there, and obviously thick skin. Remember that life doesn't just give us survivability like in other builds, it also gives us our damage. So every life node is also a damage node. So if it looks like it's a very life heavy build, that is true, but it's also a very damage heavy build at the same time. You don't need too much in terms of requirements for your skills, but once you've actually got the build sorted out. But while leveling, I took advantage of the versatility node for 20 dexterity and intelligence, and the quickness and hard knocks nodes here to get extra dexterity and intelligence before I got into the Templar and duelist areas, and then you can simply respec out of those later. So we grabbed the Iron Reflexes keystone. This converts evasion rating to armor. This is very handy with allowing us to be a little bit more flexible with our gear choices. We can pick up some armor evasion gear every here and there, but it also most importantly allows us to run the Grace aura, which gives us an extra 1900 or so armor, which is a pretty significant boost, and I think a very good choice for hardcore. Now we get the Growth and Decay cluster just here, this right hand side, which gives extra regeneration, 1.4 extra regeneration, as well as a bunch of damage over time. Now this also increases the damage of Righteous Fire, because Righteous Fire is considered a degen or a damage over time effect, so it boosts from that in addition to the regen, so it's a very nice cluster. Golem's Blood is pretty essential as well with its life regen there, but we can also grab the very nice life nodes there for a lot of extra life. Now up on this side of the tree we have the Shaper node with more life regen, and we can quickly grab the Scion life regen just there, so very easy to get to. And there's Elemental Equilibrium, which we proc with, as you can see, I've got 3 to 7 cold damage in my amulet there, but also the Ice Nova in our Cast When Damage Taken procs that to simply reduce enemy fire resistance by 50% pretty much all of the time. So this is nearly always up on enemies, and it gives us essentially doubling our damage against those enemies that are affected. Now we can come up into grabbing the Purity of Flesh cluster just there. You can actually... It kind of looks like this would be more efficient to grab first, but doing the math on these 6% nodes compared to going up into here and getting the 8% and 18% max life Purity of Flesh just there, it's actually more point efficient to go into these nodes just here and then to pick up the rest of the Scion life cluster a little bit later on. Now we come through and grab the Holy Fire cluster because that's an extra 60% increased burning damage, which does scale Righteous Fire very effectively. Now we do come through the life cluster just here, but it's very important to not get Holy Strength. Holy Strength, although it's a very nice node, gives 3% increased effective buffs on you. Sounds like a good thing. However, Righteous Fire's degen to self, so the damage it deals to us, is considered a buff effect, like it is a buff skill. And that is considered a part of that. So it increases the damage of Righteous Fire by 3%, which is actually really significant and makes it very difficult to support, and heavily outweighs the extra life that this node gives. Now, if you're running an empowered, over-corrupted Purity of Fire, then you can probably get away with doing it, but I don't think it's worth it in general. Now, we grab the aura nodes just here. The 8% reduced mana reserve from Sovereignty just there is enough by itself to run 3 auras. So Purity of Fire, Grace, and Vitality. We don't need these other ones just here. But the aura effect from this cluster is essential for increasing the maximum fire resist of Purity of Fire by an additional 1%. So it's very, very important to get. Then we come through, we've got some excellent life nodes just here, and I actually path through the weapon elemental damage. Now, I am completely aware that weapon elemental damage doesn't affect anything in our build whatsoever. This doesn't help us whatsoever. However, it's a bit more point efficient to spend these 2 points than to go through the 30 strength nodes just here. So 1, 2, 3 nodes, and we spend 2 nodes instead and get straight into the life cluster. Now with that saved point, we can essentially get another 6% life node, which outweighs the 30 strength in almost all cases based on the math I've done. So I think this is just a small efficiency. Now we grab the 1% life regeneration there, and then all of the excellent life nodes, and we come up and grab the Amplify cluster just here, which increases the damage of Righteous Fire, but also the AoE of it, which makes it a bit easier to use in maps especially. Now, in terms of where to go from here, like we have an additional 15 levels or so that we can actually get, I recommend doing things like picking up the extra area of effect radius just there to make Righteous Fire a little bit easier to use. You can also pick up the rest of the Scion life cluster just there. Other than that, you could pick up the cold resistance if you really wanted to go that route, but there's not too much else to it, really. Basically, just improving the amount of life you have and the AoE is about it. You can, if you are sort of going to the very high levels, like pushing for 100, you can come up through here, grab the fire damage, the 2 regen burning damage nodes just here, giving us another 0.4 life regen, which will give you a pretty nice boost in survivability and immolation there. So basically, this left-hand side of the cluster. Or you can forego all of this life, and you can forego some of those extra resist, keeping the fire resist obviously, and instead go up into the witch area and grab these area effect nodes here to make Righteous Fire a little bit easier to use. Give it a bit more radius to make it nicer for doing like wider open maps and things like that. Now in terms of the bandit quests, because I always forget to include this in my build guides, I went for life from Oak, and then passives from Cruel, so kill all bandits in Cruel difficulty. And then in Merciless, you have a bit of a decision. There's actually 3 good options. I went the passive route, grabbing an extra passive, and that is certainly not a wrong choice. You can get an extra life node with that, increasing your damage and survivability. Otherwise, you can go for an endurance charge if you plan on farming a fair bit of Atzari. Having an extra endurance charge makes you able to sustain Immortal Call a lot more and makes you much more tanky in those fights, so that's very handy. Or you can actually use go for the Frenzy node and use the Blood Dance uniques, which are unique boots that give regen per Frenzy charge, and they also allow you to keep up Frenzy charges. Now that's a very nice survivability boost, and it allows you to do some maps like Vulnerability and half regen maps a little bit more easily. So none of those are really bad choices, and you can make that stylistically depending on the sort of route that you want to take. So now let's take a look at gearing, and I'll leave my stat page open for you guys here as well, so you can check that out and sort of see what sort of potential stats you can have with relatively budget gear actually. Aside from some of the support gems which I just bought, the Immortal Call setup, and the 20 quality increased AoE, which I just bought recently. Everything else is worth a bit less than 3 exalts total here on Ambush. Now, currency value is going to change depending on your league and all of those sorts of different things, but basically it's for the power you get, for the survivability and the damage, it's a really surprisingly cheap build. So let's go through some of these guys, and I'll try and also tell you guys a bit of what it's worth. Now, first thing is the weapon. I'm using Brightbeak, and this is your more end-game option. Earlier on, I used a Rumvarax. Now, both a Rumvarax and Brightbeak cost max of 1 Chaos, even in new leagues. They can cost an Alk in older leagues. A Rumvarax gives a huge amount of resist and makes the rest of your gear very cheap to get, because you don't need to get as much gear when you have a lot of resist on your weapon, for example. And Brightbeak does that as well, but to a lesser extent. You can see 27 fire and 22 lightning. However, the reason we opt for Brightbeak over a Rumvrax later on is because Rumvrax has a rarity penalty on it, minus 20% rarity, and Brightbeak also has increased attack speed. So whereas with a Rumvrax we could only really use Whirling Blades, you know, for speed, or you could use Leap Slam with it, but it's not so great. You can actually use Leap Slam with Brightbeak with faster attacks here, and I'll go through the links as well. I've got it linked up to Blood Magic, Leap Slam, and faster attacks, which gives us a huge move speed boost. You can see how fast that is just with the single Brightbeak. This is with no attack speed in the build. It's much faster than running and improves your map clear speed dramatically. So fantastic. 1 Chaos, you get very fast mobility and extra resist. Pretty good stuff. Now, the only essential item in this build to be able to go Righteous Fire is your Rise of the Pheonix. Now, this guy cost me about 1.5 exalts in ambush, and these can go from anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 exalts in ambush, but the prices will vary depending on your leagues. Generally, it's a reasonably affordable item. I made a video, which you can find in the description below, on how to actually earn the currency to buy this on this character while leveling. I leveled with Searing Bond and Flame Blast, and while using those skills, I was essentially able to gather much of the currency to be able to buy this item pretty easily. So it's very attainable to be able to get this one necessary item to be able to essentially switch to Righteous Fire at level 65. And the reason we go at level 65 is because we get most of the passives we need then, but mostly because Rise of the Pheonix has a level 65 requirement. Now, I also have my cast when damage taken set up in here. We'll also go through this. I have cast when damage taken level 1, so it goes off super often. We have that linked to a level 8 Ice Nova, which is the highest level you can get before it stops casting. And having quality on your Ice Nova helps it hit more enemies. It gives more AoE. So this is very nice for proccing Elemental Equilibrium. And I also use Enduring Cry as well to generate some endurance charges passively. So that's a pretty nice setup for using that 3-link just there. Now, this helmet just here is basically life, rarity, and resist. That's pretty much it. You can also get armor on there. I'm using an armor ES base type just for ease of chromatic gearing and because it was a decent helmet, but armor type is pretty much what you want, armor or armor evasion, though I think armor type is probably going to be a little bit easier to get your correct chromatic slots, I think. But basically in my helmet I have my my curse set up, so I have Blood Magic linked to Elemental Weakness, also a self-cast Enduring Cry, so we can use that if we want to pre-generate some charges, and I actually have a second curse because I was using the dual curse boots before, but you don't actually need this, so you can actually get away with a 3-link on the helmet, so you can go very budget on the actual socketing of this and just get a nice helmet. This cost me about 4 or 5 chaos if I remember correctly. Now, next up we have my gloves. These were about 5 chaos, I think, and this is essentially just armor, life, and resist. That's about it. In terms of my setup, I'm using my aura setup on here, so I'm using Vitality, Purity of Fire, and Grace, all linked to reduced mana. Now, you need, I think, a minimum of level 17 or 16 reduced mana before you can equip all of these auras at the same time, so make sure you have that reduced mana leveled up and you've been leveling it up while you're leveling your character. On my boots here, I have life, but you'll also notice strength. Now that has almost 40 strength. Now strength actually gives HP as well, and HP is essential for this build. You want to get as much as possible, so that's always been a priority. Every time I've been looking for an item, I've been searching for the highest HP possible and trying to buy the highest HP items. Now, because strength also converts to HP, that's an additional 20 HP essentially. This actually has 105 life on it, and I got these boots actually, I think these ones are these are about 5 chaos as well, I think, if I remember correctly. So I got those reasonably cheap, but always keeping an eye out for max total life, so including strength in your calculations is very important and will help you get better deals. Other than that, I've got some rarity and you know, extra resistances. Now, you don't really need move speed in a Righteous Fire build because we use Cyclone to sort of path through mobs anyway, and they die pretty quickly anyway. If you're running too much faster, chances are you're going to leave them behind before they die, and we're using Leap Slam for mobility. So we don't really need move speed, though you can get it if you want to. Now, in terms of my chest, you want to go for, if you're using the snapshotting technique, which will be fine up until patch 1.2.0, you want to just go for the best survivability chest you can get. So I've got armor, evasion, you know, life, and resist. Basically, just a basic rare chest. I actually found this one, so I don't know what something like this would go for. Now, I'm using on this one Immortal Call with Searing Bond, so I have Immortal Call with Blood Magic, increased duration for the Immortal Call, and then Searing Bond. If you wanted to get a 5-link, you could put increased burning damage, or you could actually have 2 3-links and set that up as well if you wanted to go that route, but this works just fine for now. Searing Bond is only really for taking out totems anyway. Now, because we are going the snapshotting technique, we can do this essentially. If you're not going the snapshotting technique, then you probably want to go for something like Carcass Jack. This cost me about 1 Exalt because you don't need it 5 linked. Now, if you want to go for 5 linked to get item rarity linked in there on your Righteous Fire setup, you're actually paying a number of extra Exalts for that. So it's only maybe worth it in the very long term. But in the short term, Righteous Fire linked to increased burning damage and concentrated effect and increased area effect is all you need. Essentially, all I do is I equip Carcass Jack, I'll activate Righteous Fire, so I just press it, my character casts Righteous Fire, then I can take the chest off, and as you can see, Righteous Fire is there. I can even chuck it on the ground if I wanted to. And Righteous Fire will stay up as long as you stay in that instance. So whenever I enter a new instance, I simply snapshot. But as I said, check out the video in the description below if you want to learn more about snapshotting. In terms of belt, going for like a rare leather belt with as much HP as possible is the way to go. I actually got a good bargain on this one. I got this one for 1 fusing just by searching POEXYZ for bargains. And this one has life, it has high implicit life, so it's got 2 life rolls there, and then strength on top of that, so it actually ends up being well over 100 life on this belt, and that's pretty much the reason I got it. I didn't really even need the resist so much, and the armor is a nice little bonus as well, though 82 armor is not too much. I got this ring just here for about 1 fusing as well, another bargain. It's got life and strength, so you can again half that strength. It's almost 15 extra life on top of that, so it's almost a 100 life ring, and that's all I got that for. You know, that's pretty much it. The resists are also helpful, obviously, to have. And then a coral ring. Coral rings are obviously optimal if you've got your resist sorted out, and that one's another, 99 life there because of the implicit plus the base life, and that's basically the reason I got that. That one cost, I think, 2 chaos. And this amulet just here was 1 chaos, I think, and this one's got life. The life roll isn't too high, but again, the strength adds on top of that. Now, it was a coral amulet. I attempted to corrupt it, but no luck there. But other than that was a super cheap amulet. The one reason I sort of hung on to this is because it also has cold damage, which is very handy, because essentially it applies cold damage on our Cyclone, which means Cyclone now procs Elemental Equilibrium, as does Leap Slam. So you can Leap Slam into a pack, they'll all get affected by Elemental Equilibrium, and Righteous Fire will burn them down nice and easily, as will Cyclone. So very, very handy to have that on gear if you can. It's not necessary because we have Ice Nova, but it is still very handy. Now, on my weapon switch, we have a few other interesting things set up here. I'm using dual red beaks. Now, the way we essentially do this is my character is actually going to burn down to 1 HP because I'm not using Rise of the Pheonix at the moment. You can see how essential that item is. Red beaks cost like 1 alch each, basically. Max 1 chaos. I wouldn't pay more than that. And we use these for snapshotting, essentially. So what I'll actually do is you'll see these have 100% increased damage on low life. This is a total of 200% increased damage for only, essentially, 1 chaos. Sorry, only 1 chaos. Now, all I will do is use Purity of Elements. You can see I've got Purity of Elements linked to Blood Magic just here. And I'll cast that, and that linkage puts us down to the low life status. So then we essentially have 200% increased damage. Then all I'll do is activate Righteous Fire, and we get that we essentially take a snapshot of that low life damage, and then we can switch back over to Rise of the Pheonix, and we're good to go. However, that's not all. I also have an Animate Guardian. You can rock this guy. Animate Guardian I've used to animate the 2 unique items, Dying Breath and Learcast. So it's Dying Breath Coil Staff and Learcast Festival Mask, which gives us an extra 33% damage. Now, because this guy is in the red beak, whenever we switch weapons, he'll actually disappear, so he never dies. So I spent 3 chaos getting those items to animate, and they'll stay around forever basically. So that's a very easy setup to have. You could use Divinarius if you want more AoE, but I think red beak is the best. You could also use Searing Touch to give yourself increased burn damage, but red beak is the most cost effective. 200% damage, you can't really complain with that. So finally, I'd like to give a shout out to Oro, Colby Cheese, and Fox Tactics for all of their fantastic Righteous Fire build guides. They all have quite different Righteous Fire characters, and they're all super effective, and I learnt quite a lot by reading through their different threads and watching their videos and things like that. So thanks guys, you guys rock. I'll chuck your links down in the description below for other people to check out if you want to check out some alternative Righteous Fire builds. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and also make sure to check out those various links in the description below for as much info as you could possibly want from this Righteous Fire Marauder. And if you want to see more 7-day build projects in Path of Exile in the future, then let me know as well. That's it for now. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching.